Hey there, Reggie Rivers, founder and president of the Gala team, and want to share what I'm doing right now. I am rereading a book called Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. It's a little book, but it's really good and it's really relevant to what's happening right now with the COVID-19 pandemic. Who Moved My Cheese is basically the story about four characters. You have two mice named Scurry and Sniff. And then you have two little people who are the same size as mice, and their names are Him and Haw. Scurry and Sniff are just mice. They're simple creatures. They act on instinct and they move around. Him and Haw are humans. They're complex thinkers. They're complicated people. They're emotional people, and they use their brains to solve problems. Well, all four of them need to find cheese every day, and that cheese exists in a maze, and all four of them had successfully found cheese at cheese station C. C is in the alphabet letter C. So every day they went to cheese station C. Every day, Scurry and Sniff, the two mice, they got up at the crack of dawn. They went through the maze and they found their cheese and they got their cheese and they enjoyed it. And then they would go sniffing around and looking at other places. Well, Him and Haw are humans. They knew where the cheese was. They knew the cheese was going to be there every day. So they started sleeping in later and later, and they wouldn't sprint to the cheese. They would just walk to the cheese, and they would sit down, they'd eat their fill of cheese. Well, one morning when they get up, Scurry and Sniff, the two mice, they go running out like they usually do at the crack of dawn. They get to cheese station C, and there's no cheese there. Well, they don't spend too much time thinking about it. They look around, they sniff around, don't see anything, and off they go looking for more cheese somewhere else in the maze, and they end up finding it. It's all the way at cheese station N, as in Nancy, but it took a long time for them to find it, but they found more cheese. Meanwhile, Him and Haw, the two human characters, they got up late in the morning. They go down to where the cheese is supposed to be, and when they get there, they're like, "Hey, what happened to the cheese? Where is the cheese? Who took the cheese? Oh my God, this is unbelievable. How could this happen?" And so they spent that day, the next week, the next month, over and over again, returning to the same place and saying, "What happened to the cheese?" And because they're humans, they try to use their brain and their emotions to figure it out. Unlike the mice who just accepted, "Hey, that cheese isn't there anymore. Go find more cheese." They stayed there for a long time, agonizing over the fact that their cheese was gone, worrying about who had taken it, trying to figure out the mystery of the crime of what was going to happen, and convinced that if they just stayed right there where the cheese used to be, the cheese would come back. Whoever had taken it would bring it back. And I think it's such a great metaphor for what happens in life, and certainly for what's happening right now. Our economy and most of our jobs have been put on a temporary pause. And we're all kind of sitting around saying, "Hey, somebody moved the cheese, but don't worry about it. The cheese is going to come right back." I mean, as soon as this is over, there's going to be so much pent-up demand. The cheese is going to come right back to where it was. So we should just stay right here. And I don't believe that. I have my experience of being in the NFL, my experience of working in the corporate world, my experience working as a benefit auctioneer, my experience being a small business owner has taught me that once the cheese goes, it never comes back. Or at least it doesn't come back in the same way, in the same form, in the same place. And I think that's true now. If we're sitting around in the nonprofit fundraising world saying, "Hey, let's just put it on pause. Pretty soon, everything is going to come back the way that it was before," I think we're fooling ourselves. We should be pivoting to think about how will we raise this money if it doesn't come back the way that it was before. If social distancing forces us to not do events in the fall because the coronavirus is still around and it can still spread, and cases, we could get a second resurgence of this virus if we're not careful with our social distancing. So if we can't do live events in the fall, what would we do? Or let's say that we can do live events in the fall, but our corporate sponsors have suffered such a drop in their of their revenue, maybe a drop on their balance sheet. They've had to spend through some of their savings to stay alive, and all of a sudden they're not as eager to support your big fundraising gala as they used to be. Or what if you can hold your gala The health department says, yeah, it's okay to hold a 500, 750 person gala. And you have corporate sponsors who say, yeah, it's tough for us. We can still support you. Maybe not the level we were, but we can still support you. Well, then your individual donor base has been decimated because so many people have lost their jobs. So many people have lost value in the stock market. So many people have lost value in their 401ks. So many people are feeling less secure about their own financial situation. What will we do then? And so from our perspective as a small business, we lost our first event of the spring on March 13th. We had an event that was happening on March 13th, and we learned that we lost it on the evening of March 12th, actually, is when we learned that we lost it. Well, it was 5 days after that that we launched the virtual gala team and started learning how to do virtual galas, and then did a couple of mock virtual galas 5 days after that. And then now we have 7 or 8 virtual events that are on our calendar for this spring. And it's because we're recognizing something has to change. The cheese may not come back in the way that we think it will. And a virtual gala is a way to pivot and still raise the money that you need without having all of the costs of the venue, of the catering, of the entertainment, of the various other things that you have to pay for. To not have all those costs, well, that means you also don't have to raise as much money because you don't have as many costs to overcome. And so a virtual gala might be the answer for some of these fall events who right now are thinking, well, let's just wait it out. Everything's going to be fine. This is going to go away in July and we'll all be fine. That's waiting for the cheese to come back exactly the way it was before, to the exact same place that it was before. And I'm not convinced that that is wise. I think we should all recognize the cheese has moved. And when the cheese comes back, the cheese is going to be in a different form and probably a different place than it is right now. And we should spend this time trying to figure out how we'll succeed in this new environment with the cheese in a new location. How can we be successful doing that? We would love to help you figure that out. Thank you.